Most reviews happen after a couple of plays. I waited for 10. This game, Tend, stayed in my head between sessions, which is usually a sign of a good game. Tend presents itself as a cozy game, but it asks you to make some surprisingly sharp decisions. In Tend, you play as a pioneer who is working for the Zenith Corporation, who has been sent to a new alien planet to establish a homestead. It's a flip and write game in which you are building your farm, managing resources, and sending goods back to headquarters for study. In each round, each player will select 2 of the available 5 actions and take those actions simultaneously. As you play through the seasons, there will be new action cards that come out that will give potential bonuses if you're able to accomplish what they're asking. You're scoring points from several different angles. How efficiently are you managing your farm? Have you met your seasonal goals? How good of a neighbor are you to those around you? And how much cargo have you sent back in shipments? So there is never one obvious path to success. Let me talk about the main meat of the game, which is the task phase. In the task phase, you will select 2 of the available 5 task cards shown here. You have to select 2 unique cards. There might be circumstances where 2 of the same action are shown on different cards, and that's fine. Now let's go through what each action actually means. Now, chopping and mining are the same exact things. Chopping and mining are both going to come from this scratch-off sheet here. The chopping action is going to deal with the woods in this top half here. The mining action is going to deal with the mines showing here. You always have to start in either the woods or the mines from the very top going down. After that, anytime you take the action again, you can scratch off another square adjacent to something you've already scratched off, or you could always start a new spot from the top. You will notice that each one of these has a pathway going down to the bottom. This shows that that pathway is the fastest way to get to the very bottom, which if you get to the bottom on either one of these, you will unlock different places to go fishing. What I like to show is what it will look like on those pathways. On these scratch-off sheets, every other square will be different from sheet to sheet, but the pathways are always the exact same. So let me show you what that looks like here. You'll see in the woods, this is what it looks like. And every time you see that icon with the +1, it allows you to do that action again. So that is why it's faster to go on that pathway down, whereas on any of the rest of the squares, you'll never see that action icon again. Same for the mines over here. You will see that it allows you to do the mining action again when you uncover those spaces, and that's how you can get to the bottom faster. Next task, fishing. What fishing is going to entail is if you have an available spot to fish, you can go fishing there. We all start off with the pond available to us to fish. Later on, if you unlock the lake fishing, the grotto fishing, or even the river fishing, you will flip the card over that you have unlocked, and that is now a new location for you to be able to fish. What fishing entails is if you select the fishing action, you'll grab your 2 dice, you will roll them, and the white die correlates to the column, the black die correlates to the row. Now, in this situation, I have rolled this. I will gain this little blue fish here. Now, anytime you gain an item, I will say that you should always look to this board here. I will always reference this, and I suggest you do the same. That's all fishing is. I will say that fishing is the only action that has the potential, when you do it, to provide absolutely nothing. You will see that there are some spaces in the pond or even the grotto or even all the other available places where there are empty things. And if you happen to roll that, you get nothing. The action was a wasted action. There will be ways to mitigate that. We'll get to that in a moment. Next is the tend action. Now, tending is going to correlate to your little farm here. The tending action is focusing on plants. There are 2 different predefined areas in the farm area that have been already written in. The equal signs are fences. The little squigglies are tilled soil. When doing the tend action, you could choose to plant a crop. You could tick up a crop and adjacent crops, or you could choose to till 6 times. If you choose to till 6 times, you'll do this squiggly icon in whatever boxes you want. I'll go ahead and do that here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Why not? If you wanted to plant a crop, you have to have tilled the soil previously. And the size of the crop that you can plant is going to depend on how many spaces you have tilled. In this situation, I have a 3x3 square that I could actually plant this medium plant here. If I chose to do the tending action to plant a crop, I can grab that medium size die and put it on any 3x3 spaces that have been tilled, and now I have planted a crop. In the round phase, there is a growth phase that all of your plants or animals will increase by 1 naturally. So that will increase this up to 2, and then if it increase it again, this is the time where it will harvest. I will take it off my sheet. I will gain that item and use it in any way I want, and then I could plant crops there again. Lastly, we have our Zenith orders. All that does is give us 2 gold that we can spend in any way we want. There are many ways in which we can spend that. Let's first focus on this sheet here. We've talked about the 10 action, the different crops. There is another type of crop, a 2x2 crop that we can grow, but we first have to do a trellis by paying 2 logs and a gold in order to build a trellis. Once you have a trellis in there, then when you do the tend action, you could plant the special plant there. You have animals here. Now, animals cost money, but if you've paid the money, you still have to enclose them with a fence. As I said a little bit earlier, you have pre-built fences here, but you must have a fully enclosed area built before you can bring in any animals. How you build fences. You have this groundskeeping thing that shows you how you can spend resources to build fences. Now, in this example, let's pretend like I had actually spent some resources to enclose an area. I will go and for this example, I will do this, and I have an enclosed area. Once I spend the money, the gold, and let's say I have done that, then I will bring in a little chicken in that area to produce eggs. Now, again, in the growth phase, this will naturally increase. The thing with animals is once you get to the point of harvesting, you actually don't discard it. It stays in the fenced area and keeps on producing throughout rounds. So that is the one thing that's great about animals is they will consistently produce and keep on reproducing. We've talked about the pond fishing here. We briefly mentioned the broken bridge. This is where you can unlock the river fishing. The requirement is going to be the 2 logs, 2 gold, and then those 2 resources there. These don't have to be done in any order. If you get the stone, you can mark that off, but you do have to do all 6 of those in order to unlock the river fishing. Now, with the chopping and mining, they are going to be your levels of each of those items. So for chopping, as you are going out and chopping around the woods, you might come across these gray background squares with this little arrow at the top left. This is going to increase your chopping level. If you ever uncover one of those, you will come over and mark off the furthest left box and gain whatever the corresponding item is in that box. Same goes for mining, where the background color, it's going to be a little harder to see, is yellow, but you could always see the arrow in the top left signifying to increase your mining level. Same thing is you'll come and mark those off. The only thing that these correlate with is there will be different seasonal task cards that will have a bonus that will say, oh, you could do this action or this action. And if your mining level is 2 or greater, then you gain this ability. This obviously is not that, but that's the same concept where chopping or mining will come up later. That's all it's going to relate to. Let's talk about our upgrades here. We have our equipment upgrades and our fishing upgrades. The equipment upgrades are going to increase each of these tasks by 1. So you have your tending, you have your chopping, you have your mining. This allows you to do the action now twice if you've unlocked it by spending all of the prerequisites here. For tending, when you do the tending action, you'd be able to do 2 actions of the available actions there, and you could do them the same action twice. With the chopping and mining, this will allow you to do, in the top halves of these, you can mark off 2 boxes, or in the lower half, you can now mark off 1 box in those sections. And so those upgrades will allow you to do those actions more or have a more powerful action. The fishing upgrades are going to allow you to either increase the area in which you can grab a fish from and increase the number of fish you can grab. The rods will change the area of effect when you roll. So if I have this first fishing rod upgrade, wherever I roll, I could grab any fish in that area of effect that I want. I still can only grab one fish, but this allows me, when I roll an empty space, I can still select something in that area of effect, and that will make it so that I will never have a wasted fishing action. The lures at the bottom, once unlocked with a fishing rod, you will then be able to grab up to 2 items in the area of effect, which means you can grab the same fish twice with that action. We have our energy bars over here. You have to spend 3 gold in order to acquire them. Once you've done that, you will, let's pretend like we've marked off 3 gold. I will circle that, and now I have an energy bar available for me to use. These are 2-time uses where you can increase any of your actions' strength. So they're basically the same concept here, where once you have the upgrade, you can do mining twice or do the lower half of mining. You can do that by using the energy bar once without having to have an upgrade. So let's say if I wanted to mine on the lower level, I can just come and cross off half of it when I do the mining action to increase my power to allow me to scratch off a lower half. Each one of these energy bars can only be used twice, and then once they've been used twice, they're no longer useful to you. Lastly, we have our neighbor rewards, which at the beginning of the game, you will have selected 2 neighbor rewards, and you will have them on each side. When you acquire any item in this game, you will always look to this. You'll see the value in gold and the manifest shape that you can stamp over here. Or if the item that you had gotten is one of the items shown in your neighbor cards, you can actually spend it towards that. And what that means is, if let's say we get an egg, we harvest an egg, we can spend it towards this. Depending on what is at the bottom, you'll see either a 1 or a 2. That is how many spaces you can mark off on that neighbor track, starting from the left going to the right. So if I get this egg, if I harvested this egg, so it hit this, I could choose to spend it for this egg. I will actually give this card to my left neighbor. So I'll hand it to them. I will then come and mark off that first space. I will get that log, choose to spend it somewhere. Let's pretend like I am trying to unlock this fishing rod here. I will mark that off, and we're great. Why these neighbor rewards matter is because you'll get 3 victory points for every box you have marked off more than your neighbor on that side. Now let's talk about this sheet here. You have your projects shown in this section. You can spend gold to get different rewards. And then down here, you have your badges that you are working towards. When you get an item, you can spend it towards these badges, and you'll come and mark off. Let's pretend like that log, instead of spending it on the fishing rod, I could come over here and mark it off there. I'm not getting the gold for it. I just mark it off there. For these badges, as long as I mark off 2 of the available rows, then I will gain that badge. These give you different resources. Again, I'll refer to this and see what value they give and the shape I can mark in here. At the end of the game, if you acquired any badges, you'll get the victory points shown at the bottom. And these are great if you have extra resources to spend. A big part of the game is going to be your cargo manifest, which is showing here. Each cargo manifest will have multipliers for each stall. There are 3 stalls in total, which are contained in these kind of railroad looking lines here. Each cargo manifest will have a ×0 multiplier and a ×0 multiplier in the 2 sides, and then a ×2 multiplier in the middle. The icons showing is what types of goods they are multiplying by that number. Normally, each good put in each square is going to be 1 victory point. But in this section, if I put any farm goods, instead of being 1 victory point each, they'll be 0 victory points. If I put them in the middle stall here, each one of those, instead of being 1 victory point, will be 2 victory points. And lastly, in the third stall here, if I put any mining goods, they will be worth 0 victory points. Let's pretend like I had gotten one of these larger fish down here, which could give me this square right there. So what I'll do is I'll grab my blue marker, and I will come, and let's pretend like I had gotten that 4, and I will come and do 4 stamps there. Now at the end of the game, each one of those is going to be 1 victory point in that stall. Let's pretend like I had gotten the milk, which is going to be this shape here. I'll come and let's rotate it a little bit, right? Let's pretend like we did it like this. Now, each one of those squares is going to be worth 2 victory points at the end of the game. The limitation here is you can never put the same good adjacent to each other. So if I was to get any green goods here, the farm goods, I could never put them in an adjacent space, but I could put it in a diagonal space. So let's pretend like I got a wool. I could do this here. I want to make sure I'm doing it the right way, just because I'm OCD like that. And let's pretend like I did like that, which is great. I will get 2 victory points for each one of those boxes. This one is now just worth 1, but you kind of get the idea. As the game goes along, when you get resources, you can always put them in your cargo manifest, get the money, or spend them towards badges or some of your neighbor bonuses. Something I haven't really talked about is the different round phases. Now that we've talked about the main task phase, let's go through each one of these to complete the tutorial. The first part of it is the neighbor phase. In the neighbor phase, if anybody has given you, so in the earlier scenario, I had accomplished this egg. I had given it to my left neighbor. They have this waiting in their area, and this is when they could actually take it and spend it how they'd like. They could use it on a badge. They could look here to see, oh, the egg gives me 1 gold or the 1 farm good. I could put that in my cargo manifest. They could use it however they want. They'll use it, they'll discard it, and you as a player, in that scenario, I still had that. You as a player will then get to draw 2 cards and choose one of them. In this situation, I want to do another egg because I have this chicken that keeps on producing more eggs. And I will discard that. Great. You could always choose to discard an existing card and draw new cards because I might not be going for fishing. I'll draw 2 new cards, and again, I drew the same thing, so I will actually choose another egg. And we're good there. Next is the scoring phase. This only happens at the end of each of the seasons. There are 3 total seasons, and they're denoted by these colors, and they are going to correlate to your objectives here. You will see them throughout the game, and you can work towards them. I will say that as you start this game, I would look at the multiplier to see maybe an idea as to what you should be working towards, but these objectives are going to be where you're getting a lot of your points. So focus on these, make sure you're working towards them. Next is the setup phase. This is where we will clean up from the previous round. So I'll put all these in the discard. I will then only draw 3, and then I will start introducing season task cards. I will flip the next ones up to see what's coming next. And now that is my setup phase. Lastly is the growth phase, and this is where you will uptick any animals or plants that you have planted. And then we go right back in the task phase. We'll do 2 tasks. As you're doing the actions, you will write down the letters of what you're doing. So let's pretend like I do mining and fishing. So I will come here and do a mining and a fish. And then now that we're in round 2, I'm going to come over here. I see reach the middle of the woods or mines. I can maybe do chopping, and I'll come here and do chopping. And if I had gotten to the middle of the woods, I'd get 3 gold coins. Let's pretend like I do fishing here. And this will go on through the rest of the game until round 12 is complete. Everyone's done all their actions, and then you will score victory points. You'll score objectives throughout the game. You'll score stalls for what you have in your stalls, and you'll include the multipliers that you have shown here. Then you'll count up your neighbor victory points, and then any badges that you've completed, you'll put here, and then the summation of all those will be your total, and that's how you play Tend. After my first play, my immediate thoughts were, this is a cute game. There was a lot going on at first, but once everything clicked, it became surprisingly clear. What stood out to me, even in my early plays, was that the game was not confusing, just busy. Once you understood how the objectives, the actions, the seasons all interact, Tend becomes very readable. That was especially clear in teaching my dad how to play the game. It just made sense for him, which gave me the confidence that this game does very well in communicating what it's asking you to do. One thing that became very obvious in my continued plays of the game is that Tend doesn't guarantee that your strategy will work. I've had games where the objectives lined up beautifully and I scored really low. I've had other games where the objectives seemed to butt heads, but I scored really high. In all of those experiences, I really enjoyed the game. Tend really rewards commitment, but punishes tunnel vision. When you go hard into a strategy, whether that be fishing, chopping, mining, tending, things can pay off really well. But there might be rounds where none of the action cards come out that you need, and things can go south pretty quickly. I've had games where I've focused heavily in certain areas, and it paid off. But then I've had a lot of other games where the action cards just didn't come up when I need them, and I did pretty poorly. That tension between committing early and staying flexible is where a lot of that decision pressure lives. Across all my plays, 3 things consistently drove my decisions: the objectives, the ×2 multiplier in your cargo, and the seasonal task cards. The ×2 cargo multiplier particularly shapes your opening plans. But what surprised me was, over time, they didn't seem like there was any multipliers that were inherently broken. What mattered more was how much investment you put into it. Early on, I thought one of those multipliers was broken, that being the purple multiplier, but after many plays, what became clear was that any multiplier could do well as long as you commit to it. And the season cards constantly force you to adjust. What worked well early on might not work well later. And that helps the game from feeling solved. In Tend, I think the player count doesn't necessarily change the experience of the game unless if you're playing solo. In games which you are playing with 2 or more players, the neighbor reward cards are utilized to the full extent. When someone accomplishes a neighbor card, they will hand it to their neighbor, and they will gain those incoming rewards and use them however they would like. In solo play, you don't get those incoming rewards, which doesn't help drive your engine as much as I would like in the game. Now, all that being said, not all neighbor bonuses are equally represented. There are some strategies in this game that are more supported through neighbor bonus cards than others. And the more you play it, the more that becomes noticeable. Now, it's not a deal breaker, but it stood out across multiple plays. Also, the distribution that I found with a lot of research here on the screen now for you to see for yourself. Overall, what impressed me the most about Tend was how my opinions changed across plays. Strategies that I thought were dominant softened. Paths that I didn't initially take became viable. And what felt cozy at first revealed a surprisingly tight decision space. Once I started tracking my plays, a lot of these feelings started showing up in the data, which brings me to the stats. Now, in the board game Tend, I've played the game 16 times, with 6 unique players, and the cost per play is down to $8.06. As we look at the breakdown, I have played solo 7 times, with 2 players 4 times, with 3 players 2 times, and with 4 players 3 times. As we look at the pathway to 10 plays, I got the game on October 23rd, and I got my first play in just 2 days later on the 25th. It took me 48 days to hit my 10th play, which was December 11th, and then any plays after that was just a little spice on top. Now in this next chart, we're looking at the score distribution broken out between player count. I'm using a box and whisker plot chart here. I want to talk about the average of the scores, because to me that's a little bit more telling than the box and whisker plot you see here. In solo play, the average score comes to be around 97 points per game. In 2 players, that goes up to 117. In 3 players, we're looking at 125. And then with 4 players, we're looking at 170. Now, I think outside of solo play, those averages will even out the more I play it. In solo play, I do see it being a little bit lower due to the fact that I'm not getting those neighbor cards as I've talked about previously. I think that's a big part of why the score will be lower. But in higher player counts, I do see those scores averaging out and being somewhat similar. Next, we're going to do a breakdown of the percentage of scores. We're going to look at the 10 lowest scores and the 10 highest scores. First, we're looking at cargo. In the 10 lowest scores, 62% of their score came from cargo. And at the 10 highest, only 47%. Looking at objectives, the lowest at 18% and the highest at 38%. Next, badges. Lowest is 14% and the highest only 6%. Lastly, the neighbor bonuses. Lowest was at 6% and the highest was at 9%. Now, lastly, as we look at the gameplay time, I will mention that I did make a mistake as I drew this, but you know what? Here we are. That's okay. I didn't want to restart after that point, but as I'm mapping out the amount of time it took to play the game in each of the player counts, I will talk about more of the average. The average for solo play came to be around 35 minutes. In 2 players, it was an hour and 30 minutes. In 3 players, it was an hour and 34 minutes. And then with 4 players, that was 2 hours and 26 minutes. As we look at the 4-player, you'll see those 2 outliers pretty high there. That was me playing solo with multiple hands, so playing by myself with 4 different sheets. I think the average for most games probably will be between the hour and 30 mark and 2 hour mark. At solo play, it will be significantly lower. I think that once you add at least one other player, it doesn't matter however many you add on top of that, the plays will be around an hour 30 to 2 hours, and that's kind of what I would expect going forward. Now, after 10 plays, Tend is a game I really respect. It's calm on the surface, yet it rewards planning, patience, and adaptability in such a way that it keeps bringing me back to the table. If you enjoy games where small decisions compound over time and adaptability is rewarded, and your strategies might not pan out through time, Tend is absolutely worth your attention. If you're looking for big moments, constant interactions, or a game that constantly tells you the right move to make every turn, then this game might not click for you the same way it clicked for me. Now I'm curious for those who have played this game. How did the plays go for you? Are there any strategies that felt stronger than others? Did those strategies hold up over time? Let me know in the comments. And if reviews centered around games that have been played multiple times are interesting to you, consider subscribing. I'll see you next time on Deck of Dice.